Hello, beautiful souls. Thanks for joining me today. In this episode, I chat with Denise Hnytka of WQAD News. We talk about why she became a journalist, the reasons behind why she started her podcast on a mother level, and the advice she has for young people who are thinking of going into journalism today. We also chatted about how a story is put together for broadcast news. It's really interesting to find out what goes on behind the scenes before that story ends up on the air. So, thanks for joining me for this week's episode. Denise Hnytka. Hey, welcome back to the Holistic Life Coach podcast. I have the distinct privilege to sit down today with Denise Hnytka, evening anchor for WQAD and the host of the On a Mother Level podcast. She is a wife and mother of two sons. Denise graduated from Western Illinois University in 2006 with a BA in broadcasting, and she joined WQAD in 2011. Welcome, Denise, to the pod.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on today.
I'm really excited to have you on, and we have so much to talk about. But I like to go back to the beginning and get a sense of where a guest came from. So what was 7-year-old Denise doing? And where did she grow up? And
7-year-old.
Yeah. What did she want to be when she grew up?
So when I was 7, I grew up in Palatine, Illinois, which is a northwest suburb of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived in a little ranch house, and we walked to school every day. It was maybe half a mile or so. And when I was 7, I'm pretty sure I wanted to be a doctor. I'm discovering with my own boys the same thing, but I loved forms. Do you remember being a kid and like anything that came in the mail that like looked like a form? I wanted to fill it out. You know, I loved a form. And so I would have all these like fake forms that I would take out of the mail, and those would be like my patient's charts.
Got it.
And so I had all these fake patients that were only forms, and that was my like playing doctor was playing forms. So maybe I should have been an accountant or some sort of paper pusher of some kind. But yeah, that was 7-year-old Denise. I loved a good form. So yeah, for a long time, I thought I would do something medical related or doctor related. 7-year-old Denise was very tall. I have been tall since the moment I could remember. And I think growing up tall as a girl, really shaped my personality a lot because it made me very, very shy and withdrawn, you know, because I stood out a lot. You know, it was like I could not go places without people noticing that I was just this very tall girl in the late 80s. So I think that had to do a little bit with how I ended up in television journalism in some strange backwards way. But yeah, 7-year-old Denise liked to try a lot of different things. I like to try sports. I like to try music. Yeah. That's still true of me. I'm still a joiner. I love to join things. I like group activities.
Yeah. So any group activities that are you doing now? Are you involved in any sports or like working out and things like that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And, you know, not so much anymore because I feel like there's not like, you know, like, I guess there are like teams you can join as a 37-year-old woman. But, you know, like I love a mom's group. I'm seeing my mom group friends tonight. So I'm doing that. I joined, I guess I am a liar. I joined a running club. So that starts in a couple of weeks. Yeah. So, and I ride my Peloton, which is a total group, total cult. So yeah, I guess I joined that too.
Yeah.
See, still a joiner.
Yeah. I'm familiar with Palatine because I grew up on the northwest side of Chicago, near Park Ridge.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
And of course,
A lot of ties to Park Ridge around
yeah,
here.
I had noticed that your last name is hard to say, like my last name. And what's funny is, and you probably, I don't know, maybe you've experienced this, but if I'm in a group and they're calling out names and they say Lisa, and then they stop. They didn't, and yeah,
Yeah.
it must be me. It's Stroda. Do they like have how,
Okay.
how was it for me? It was at first I didn't like when people would get stuck on my name, or I get the type of thing. I don't know how was your experience growing up with so-called an ethnic name. Now I've grown
Yeah.
to love it, because it really is for me like a conversation starter. People get stuck on it, and I know I've learned how to make them at ease with trying to pronounce it, and then kind of going into my
Yeah.
background. So can you give us a little
Yeah.
information about that, and the
Sure.
ethnicity of your name?
Yeah. Well, so you have the same problem as me, which is, can I buy
Yeah.
a vowel? Because I'm all consonants in a row, unless you do the sometimes Y. So
Hmm.
HNYTKA. And so yeah, everyone always tripped over
Hmm.
it. Always, always. The only people who didn't were like the teachers who had my brother the year before me,
Yeah.
So yeah, people have always tripped over it, and it's a Ukrainian
Hmm.
name. And I think growing up, and like I said, I was tall, so I already stood out in a weird way. So then I had this weird name, and so I felt like I stood out more. And so when you're a kid, those things are difficult, because you sort of at that age you don't really want to be noticed for all the things that make
Hmm.
you unique, that you now love about
Hmm.
yourself. But especially as a girl, you're like, or at least that's how it was for me. But no, it's like I've always known it was really special to have an ethnic last name,
Hmm.
because having that name I knew was associated with my Baba and Jito.
Hmm.
And so that's Ukrainian for grandma and grandpa. And they have always been in my life. They were in Palatine, and so they were always just a short drive away.
Hmm.
And what's interesting about being Ukrainian is that when I grew up, it was sort of like we recognized that we had this heritage, but now as an adult, I recognize, and in having more adult conversations with my Baba and Dito over the
Hmm.
years, it was like they, more than anything, were proud to be American,
Uh-huh.
because they came to America and it was hard to get
Hmm.
here. And they came here under duress during World War II. And so while we knew they were Ukrainian and they had a lot of Ukrainian things around the house and they cooked Ukrainian foods, and it was always very
Hmm.
present, but I now know that overall they were proud Americans,
Uh-huh.
and they went to Ukrainian church and had Ukrainian traditions, but 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 that was never more important than being Americans.
Yeah.
And so I thought, now having that hindsight as an adult, I think that's also really special about them. And it sums up their journey so much,
Yeah.
that they left this country in a time of war, like they're seeing right now. And they made a really beautiful life for themselves in Palatine. And they met each other in Chicago, and they worked in Chicago and were successful and had kids and now have grandkids and great
Wow.
grandkids. So yeah, they're my Dito's no longer with
Mhm.
us. He died in 2019. My Baba's still alive. And so yeah, just that name, you ask
Mhm.
about a name and it's like all of that just came spilling out of me, because I recognize, like my husband, for example, not everybody has a story associated with their name. They don't know where it came from, or it's, been kind of muddied over the years. And, so I recognize, especially as an adult, how cool and significant it is to have meaning behind a name.
Yeah. Yeah. Like there aren't that many Strodas in the United States. And years ago when I was started with genealogy, before the internet, and I had gone to the library downtown Chicago, and they had telephone books from all around the world. So I decided I'm going to look up, Poland. Yeah, let's look up Strodas. Okay. Gee, there are a few in here. But then when I looked up Germany, there's so many more Strodas in Germany than Poland. And I thought, gee, that's really strange. But it put me on this journey of trying to find out more about my great-grandparents who came over. Similar story to your grandparents. My great-grandparents came over, I would say it was like 1885 or something like that. My great-grandfather came over with his younger brother, or his brother, and he was 16 at the time. And then my great-grandmother came over. They met in Chicago. They ended up living maybe a couple miles apart in Poland. And I thought, when looking at the record, that they probably went to the same church, but they had to walk a mile to church every Sunday, But I was kind of surprised that they didn't meet there, but they met in Chicago. And the funny story about that is that my grandfather and his cousin met these girls, these sisters, and they decided to double date. So they all went out. And then after the date, my grandfather said that he liked the sister. He didn't like the one he was paired up with. He liked the sister. And the other one said, well, I like your date better than mine. And then they ended up marrying. They were 20 and 21. And then had, like 9, 10 kids. My grandfather was the youngest. And like you said, they were proud to be American. My father, I asked my dad, why did Grandma and Grandpa, they were both, their parents both came from Poland. They learned how to speak Polish, even though they were born here. How come you didn't learn to speak Polish? And he says, no. Yeah. He said, and he told me, he says, I never, disobeyed my father. I always took his advice. And I wish this is the one time I wish I didn't take his advice. And I wanted to learn Polish, and he said no. He says, you are American, and you speak English, and be proud that you're American. And now my dad was born in 1935, so it was all during World War II and that. So there was more of a, we are American, and it's not this separation of peoples. It was everybody wanted to be American and stick together. But he says, yeah, I wish I did. I mean, he knows a few things, like he knows Silent Night in Polish. So it's just but yeah, it's a similar story. It's how they met here. And they married St. Stanislaus Kostka Church in Chicago. I was there a couple of years ago visiting. It was the oddest experience. I was like, wow, 100 years ago, my great-grandparents were professing their vows in this spot. So
that's wild.
So to have that history and is really special, like you said. So now going into broadcasting, were you ever told that, hey, you should change your name, or at least change the spelling, or so?
No, never once. Never, ever once. I was told to change all kinds of things about myself, hair, clothes, wardrobe, personality, but never name. Never once name. And I don't think I would have either. Never even really crossed my mind. And, even when I got married, it was not a question that I was going to keep it. And I keep it professionally, and then I have my husband's name personally. And so if I ever left TV, I think I would have a really hard time not still having that second identity,
Yeah.
that I still very much identify with. Yeah, so right now I kind of like living in both worlds. But no, never was asked to change it.
Wow. Wow. I know years and years ago, the movie stars used to change their names. They had, they were just, they got away from ethnic sounding names. And then I don't know, maybe what the last 30 years probably,
Right.
they keep their names. And that's why I asked if it was ever, brought up to you that,
Yeah.
and because I've got it where, I might.
No, I know other people who have been asked. Other people have, but not me for some reason. But yeah, I know it exists. It exists. And yeah, people have been asked in the past, but not my experience.
So 7-year-old Denise was into forms and what information, and how did
Yeah.
So how did that translate go into journalism? I mean, you're collecting information about people or like your pretend patients that you had. I mean, and this is a different type of collecting information or presenting information to a wider audience.
Yeah.
How did that journey start?
Yeah. I was shy growing up, so I don't think I ever pictured that I would not be a shy adult. But I love to read. I love to read. And I was really good at reading out loud, really good at it. And I was never afraid of it. And I would always volunteer. I grew up Catholic to read, the readings at church. We went to church, once a week with our classroom. And I always volunteered to do the reading. And I really liked that. And it's, at some point you become aware that your voice is, perhaps lower than a lot of other little girls, that you know. And so I think I sort of recognized that my voice was, special in some way. Although again, when you're a kid, you're like, why doesn't my voice just sound like everybody else's? So I think I had these little sort of like inklings that could be my future if you were like, studying, I don't know, the roadmap of it. So, and my parents watched the news every night. They watched the news every night, and we listened to the radio, when we were driving places. And I remember one day my dad just kind of throwing it out there super casually, like, you could do something like that. You can talk. You're good at talking. You're good at that. And I'm like, what? I know, never even considered it. Never even thought that would be something for me. And so, that kind of always stayed in the back of my head. But, really the turning point for me of really kind of solidifying what I wanted to do was, as lame as it sounds, was on September 11th. I was a senior in high school on September 11th. And that was the time when we were kind of allowed to, watch TV in our passing periods, or the teacher would, bring in a monitor or something for us to be able to watch. And, all we had was what we were being shown on the TV. Yeah. That was the only place to get information about what in the heck was happening across the country from us, So we're just a bunch of, like regular kids at Fremd High School, and all we had was the TV. And I was so, just like everybody else, I was just, studying what was happening and watching these reporters work. And I remember feeling like this sense of duty, like if I listen to the latest update, then I can go and tell that latest update to somebody else. And so then I would go to the next class and I would say, well, they just said that they think it's this Osama bin Laden guy and something about how he might be involved in this. And, I distinctly remember telling my classmates, like, I just heard the newest information. And I realized not only did I really want to know all the stuff, but I wanted to be the one to tell other people all the stuff. And I just, the job of those reporters that day, they were all we had. they were all we had. We weren't, close to it to understand what was happening. And we just watched these people and trusted these people to tell us what was going on. And so that just really solidified it for me that day, that at the end of the day, I'm a reader. I like to know things. I'm pretty nosy. And it turns out I like to be the one kind of in charge of telling other people about it. So yeah, I always feel like that's like a lame story, like, oh, 9/11 helped me, but no, it's really true. It sort of was like, that would be a job for me. So yeah, it took off from there.
It sparked that desire, that realization that I have these talents. Okay, so how am I going to put these to use, right? So then what was the next step?
Right.
So someone who is thinking of going into journalism, what was your next step? Going into college? How did you pick? Well, did you look for a specific college, specific degrees, things like that?
Yeah. Well, at this time, this was 2002 that I graduated from high school. And so college was really expensive. And so, still is, I suppose. Yeah. But so I decided to stay in state. And, I saw that Western had a good broadcasting program. I don't think I realized how good it was at the time, but I knew they had the facilities and the things that I needed. And so I decided to go to Western. My dad had gone to Western, and it seemed like a 4-hour drive was a really safe distance from my family. And I really liked that it was that far away. But it wasn't, scary far away. It felt like the perfect amount of far away for me. And so I went down to Western, and I, declared this major of broadcasting. And I just sort of felt my way through it. I remember seeing a poster on the wall that said, would you like to try out for our news anchor positions? And I was a freshman, and I don't even think I'd taken a real broadcasting class yet, but I was like, well, okay. So I tried out for this student anchor position, and for no apparent reason, they gave me one. And I didn't realize at the time, but it was like very much unheard of that a freshman would get one of these opportunities. And so my professors, who I still keep in touch with, are always like, oh, we knew that you were really good at this. And I'm like, I didn't even comb my hair. Like, what? Like, so I think it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating that they saw something in me that I most certainly was not projecting on purpose. I didn't have any money for clothes, and I didn't know how to do my makeup. There was no YouTube tutorials of how to put on eyeshadow. So yeah, I felt like I was just winging it, and the right people believed in me at the time. And so Western was this really beautiful program that felt like home right away. And because of it, I was offered a tremendous number of opportunities that all led to my professional opportunities. And so I'm so grateful to Western because, it's not the storied broadcasting department that like, a Mizzou or Arizona with their Cronkite School of Journalism. But because it's small, the opportunities are much more available to you. Larger schools, you don't touch a piece of equipment until you're a junior. And there I was anchoring this student newscast as a freshman. So there were a tremendous amount of opportunities and people willing to give me them. So yeah, my college experience was just fantastic. I couldn't ask for better.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something to think about when looking at a college. That helps someone who's listening to us will, like you said, other schools may have these reputations for journalism, but that nothing can replace that hands-on training or having those supportive teachers or mentors who will let you try it, and having that faith in you, that confidence in you, if you don't have it in yourself. They're not going to let me try something if they know that I'm really going to screw it up. They know I can do it. That
Right.
then, I can do it. That I should at least try it. So yeah, so 7-year-old Denise
Right.
was, like you said, had the had the ethnic last name and didn't want that attention. And then as a freshman in college, tries out for the anchor position and gets it. Where did
Right.
So in between there, like, where did that confidence come from? Was it from dad saying, I think you can do this, and having supportive
Yeah,
family
maybe.
around, like,
I'm not even really sure, because I think in some respects, not having even the wherewithal to think that I shouldn't have confidence, it was sort of like, it was like, now I'm much more self-aware, and I'm much more like afraid of things than I think I was back then. And I don't even necessarily know why. I guess it maybe Western made it this environment where I didn't feel, like I would be judged for trying something, or, maybe it was just the independence of feeling like I was on my own and I didn't have anyone to rely on but myself to do a good job in this program. It's like when you leave this like cozy nest of high school, and then you are, you actually have to make steps and moves that define your destiny for the next 4 years in college. I think I strangely rose to the occasion, and yeah, I almost, it's like ignorance is bliss. Like, I didn't know to be embarrassed that I didn't comb my hair. I didn't know to be embarrassed that like, I thought, well, nobody has money for clothes. Like, if I don't have money for clothes, why would anybody else have money for clothes? That sort of thing, where it was just like, I assume that you guys are all right here with me. And for the most part, they were,
Yeah. Yeah. So what are the qualities that a news anchor needs to be effective, needs to be a good news anchor? Hey, we're going to come back to the show in a minute. Could you do me a favor? Could you fill out a form at the holisticlifecoachpodcast.com and jump on the horn with me for 10 minutes? I'd like to know your likes and dislikes about the show and the biggest reason you're listening to the show. This gives me a chance to get to know my listeners. Thanks. Now, let's pick up where we left off.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things. I think you need to know a lot about a lot of stuff. And I think you can only do that by being curious. You have to be curious about everything around you. Why do these people think this way? Why are politicians, pushing for this? Why are decisions being made? What's influencing them, and what comes next? What are cause and effect of certain issues? So I think it's like there's a bunch of different branches of the tree, but the baseline is curiosity. Are you curious about the world around you? And are you then driven to take those questions and try to find answers to them? And then, on top of that, there's the ability to write well. I've always really been a good writer. I've always been able to get my thoughts out on paper very well. And I will say that writing seems to be a bit of a lost art. I think young people that I've come across in my career have a harder time writing. And I don't know what that's a product of. I don't know if it's, always having spell check and things like that kind of, lets you be a little bit more of a lazy writer. But writing is such a huge part of my job, because not only do I have to, get the thoughts and facts out on paper, but they have to come out in a way that I only get one shot to share it with you. When I read a story and it lasts for 20 seconds, it's not like a newspaper where you can go, I didn't understand that sentence. Let me reread that sentence again. I'm on to the next story. So I have to I have to write things in such a way that you understand me the very first time that you hear it. And that's really difficult. You cannot have too many, they say like the ideal sentence has no more than 11 words.
Mhm.
And if you started counting your words in your sentences, you realize most are a lot longer than that, So I think writing is really, really huge. And then, like I said, the delivery of it. The delivery has to be, friendly. It has to be credible.
Mhm.
As much as like you don't want image to be important, it is. As much as you don't want voice to be important, it is. People make snap judgments of me within 2 seconds of seeing me. And if I am visually distracting in some way,
Uh-huh.
you're not going to listen to my writing, whether it's the best writing you've ever heard or not.
Mm.
You are going to go, I really don't like her shirt.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of competing factors. And then on top of that, most likely my viewer has their phone in their hand.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I no longer really have this connection with them anymore. They're only connecting with me through what they hear, and so I have to hopefully make them look up.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors at play, in this job for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of factors that we as viewers don't think about, that wouldn't think of those things, that those are in play as a viewer. Yeah. That's really interesting.
Yeah. A lot of times, especially when there's young producers in the building, I remind them that we're trying to put on a good TV show, which is not how you're supposed to think of as television news. It's not like a TV show. When you think of TV show, maybe you think of like Real Housewives. But at the end of the day, what I do is 2 TV shows every day, and it's like, how do we make good TV? And I don't mean that in a salacious way. I just mean programming that makes you feel like it was important that you watched, whether it's for entertainment or information or, what have you. But we have to produce television programs that someone walks away with going, I'm glad I spent my 30 minutes there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How much control do you have over the way a story is told? Or can you take us or to the beginning of a story? Like, I'm sure there's, there's the breaking news that you have, like what's happening in Ukraine, versus a story that you might pitch about that isn't timely, or is time. If it's not on the air tonight, or it can be put on the air 2 weeks from now. Yeah. Can you take us from the beginning, and then how do you analyze and interpret all the information that is coming at you, and how do you decide what goes on air?
Yeah. Well, and there's a couple of different ways to answer that question, because, there are a bunch of different ways that our stories are put together. We have a staff of reporters that's out, working on their stories. And so when I introduce their stories, that's their work, not mine. And so I wouldn't say that I have very much control over what, a reporter has pitched for the day. But what my job is to do is to, I'm one of like the final editors who goes through a reporter's script, makes sure there's no grammar errors, fill in any holes where you're going, oh wait, now what happened to that person? What, any little gaps of information that I think would be pertinent to a viewer. And then there's, the little stories that you'd see in a newscast that, you probably don't realize are only 20 seconds long, but they're just, the type is this long. It's just a couple of short sentences. And so I have a little more control over those things, because I, again, have kind of the final say of how they come out. Given, though, that television news is short and for the most part to the point, there's just not enough time. There's just not enough time to address every nuance that could be included in every story. Sometimes I hate it when we get those emails that are like, when you talked about this, you didn't mention this. And it's like, well, I didn't mention this or this or this or this or this. And I think that's often interpreted as malicious or, agenda driven.
Yeah.
And for the most part, it's not, because it's driven by time.
Okay.
It's driven by brevity, and it's driven by just the format of this TV show that we make every night.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough. It's tough because there's just a lot of things that we can't include. And there's just, things are not visually stimulating. Again, we're making good TV here, so some stories are just not interesting on television. So those get left out. So yeah, control is a funny thing because there are so many factors that come into play. Deadlines and access and who's willing to talk about this particular thing on this day,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important, I think, that we know these things, because like you said, you got the letter that says we didn't include this and this. And then when you explain, well, this is what I'm up against. These are parameters I have to work in. So this is why these certain things were left out. I think people go, oh, okay, now I get it. And I've seen that with just other events happening in the world where something will happen and then all of a sudden there's a call to, not do this or do this. And then instead of asking, well, why did somebody do that in that way? Let's find out why this happened in this certain way before we decide to make this big decision or form an opinion about something that we just saw, on TikTok or on the news where, like you said, where it's only a few seconds long. So to know everything that goes on behind the scenes and to know that you are checking someone else's work. Because I've been on some news websites where the grammar where the grammar was just atrocious, or the newspaper where I've read it and
it goes back to the writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And though I could tell, okay, they ran it through spell check because the mistakes here are, this is a word, but this is not the word that you meant. You meant something else. And I know what you meant. You're supposed to, this is spelled correctly, but this is, this is wrong. And so one of my questions, like, what are they teaching in journalism school? If me as this layperson who, I've had like high school journalism finds these mistakes. At one point I wanted to be a photojournalist. My father told me it was fine. I wanted to be a cameraman. That was when I was like 14, 15. My dad's like, no, you can't do that. I'm like, why not?
Yeah.
You're not tall enough. You have to be tall to put the camera up on your shoulder. I'm like, fine. I'm like, and then I was really into sports. I wanted to be a sports anchor. And my dad said, no, you can't be a sports anchor. Why not? Well, because you have to be able to interview athletes. You have to be able to go interview them in the locker room. So you're going to be going to a locker room with all these men. And men, they walk around naked. They're not going to, you can't go in there. So you cannot be a sports anchor. Okay, fine. It was just one thing, knocked out after another. But it's just, it's some of these things you don't think of.
Look at all the women who are doing
exactly.
that job.
Yeah. And when I was in high school, my high school journalism class, I remember us learning that reporters are supposed to be, we were learning about bias and how to be unbiased. I don't know, like it seems over the years that even if a reporter's unbiased in the reporting, but say the network has a reputation of leaning a certain way, how is that for you? Because if I bring up a story, something I heard on the news, I heard this, oh, where did you hear that? And I mentioned the network. Oh, that's fake news. Oh, that one leans this way, that one leans this. And so it's even frustrating for me to go, well, wait, what about the reporter? What about the story itself? How is that for you? I don't know. Have you encountered anything where I would think it would be very hard for people to be journalists, to go into journalism nowadays, because their credibility was just constantly being questioned, and you're doing your best to put that out there, to put a unbiased story out there, but then all this other noise around it that you sure have no control over. The way people are going.
What you're describing. Yeah. Look, there's no question that it's a huge problem in our industry, and I think if you do the job that I do and you say that it doesn't exist, I don't think you're being honest with yourself about that. And I think it's a huge problem when it comes to the future of our industry in general, because I am regularly told, by really well-meaning people that they just don't believe the things I say, and it's because of the things you're describing, which is, well, if it's true at CNN, why wouldn't it be true in your local newsroom? Cable news has really done us a disservice. A huge, huge disservice, because I don't think it's easy to tell anymore who is a journalist and who is a commentator. And those lines have become so blurred. And I think it's a real shame, because I think we're only hurting ourselves by doing that. And I think COVID really revealed that in a big, big, big way, where it was clear that some viewpoints were tolerated and others were absolutely not tolerated. And all of that bad feeling people have trickles down into these tiny little local newsrooms, where if people knew, and I feel like people around here do know, but if people knew that I was just a mom of two who comes to work and does the absolute best that I can, and it's like I'm not clever enough to try to sell you on my viewpoint, because I'm just a mom who does a job, and I like my job and I'm passionate about it, but I am not some sort of wizard who has any desire to shape your view of the world in any sort of way. And so, I think trying to humanize myself helps people to not feel automatically the things that they feel about me, because they believe I am part of the liberal media, and hey, it's not just like random people on the street, it's like, an uncle who's like, you work at the news, don't you? That's a like just assumptions. And I mean, bottom line is you're not crazy for noticing it. And like I said, I think if we as an industry are honest with ourselves, we have a real credibility issue, and we have a real we have to do a better job of explaining to our viewers why we are credible and why our information is not tainted in some way. And that's an ongoing conversation in this newsroom, I can tell you that, but I can't necessarily speak for what they're doing at CNN, but there are some networks that are harder to watch than others, because you just feel like you're being given half of the story or 3/4 of it, And I think that's, it's hard for me, in this business, and it's hard for me just as a news consumer. At the end of the day, I like the news. That's why I, became one as a professional, because I like it. And so as a consumer, sometimes I feel frustrated too.
Yeah. I know the Chicago Tribune last year went, hey, I guess they did, like, they cleaned house, just quote unquote. And a lot of the reporters had left, and it's about maybe about an inch thick. my dad has a subscription to it, still gets it every morning. And it's still, there's not that much in there when I go into Chicago and go to read it. And that's why I was wondering if someone who goes into journalism, are they then going to pick whether they're going to go into broadcasting, or do they go, are there some that want, like you said, want to write for a paper? Like, you have so many seconds to tell a story, but when you're writing for the paper, you have this amount of space, this many words, and the reader can go back if they misinterpreted something, if they if they weren't clear with that, they can go backwards. Like you said, on TV, it's out and that's it. I mean, do you make that decision when you're in college to go a certain track, or do you graduate with this degree and then decide, maybe through experience, or to go a certain way?
And I think that depends on the school. For me, there was a journalism program, but I joined the broadcasting program. So I knew that I was not going to be learning newspaper journalism. Some schools just call it communication, so it definitely depends on what the program looks like. But yeah, there was a kind of a track that I was able to choose. I could have gone down the hall where the radio kids hung out, or I could have stayed in the TV area. And I just happened to stay in the TV area. I did try radio, but I was, for some reason, more drawn to the TV side of things. And there are now, where you can even narrow it down even more and do actual sports broadcasting. I don't recommend it, but you can. So yeah, it really, really depends on your program. And again, if you're not sure, maybe pick a program that'll let you try all of the things, or, job shadow somebody, or, spend some time figuring out what these tracks actually mean, because, radio and newspaper jobs are not as abundant as they once were. And quite frankly, neither are TV jobs. So there's a little bit of hesitation in, recommending anyone do this job, because I don't know that it's, I think there's a lot of different ways where you can do this work, maybe, and you're not tied to a newsroom. I wonder if in the future this is more of a freelance content creation sort of a world where, maybe people don't get together and work out of a newsroom anymore, but you all contribute whatever content it is that you provide. And maybe newsrooms, select their talent that way, where you're really more focused on doing one sort of thing. I think this industry, I've said it since the day I walked into it, I think this industry is going to change a whole lot, and in the 15 years that I've been in it, it really has. And so I think, the next 10 will be dramatically different as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's changed. So media, technology has changed so much of our world. And, that, like, FaceTiming and Zoom, and you, who recently, this has been done on the news before, but just able to talk to that young girl in Ukraine now, who's right there, who you interviewed on your podcast. And it's just amazing that, first of all, that we could do that, but then also where she is with everything going on, that you were able to be in contact with her and to get her story, and also, like you said, showing a more human side of you. I know you do that on your podcast. So can you tell us why you started the podcast, and what do you find fulfilling about the podcast on a mother level? I like that name too.
Sure. So much. I started the podcast in 2019. I had just had my second son, and it wasn't going terribly well. I was not good at being a mom of two. And so I started talking about that a little bit. I started talking about it on Facebook and found out that other women felt the same way about whatever level of parenting that they were in. And so when the opportunity came to be able to create a podcast, I am a podcast listener. I'm a podcast consumer. I listen to podcasts the way people have music on. I just have it on. I enjoy the conversations. I like the chatter. And so I have a whole bunch of different podcasts that I listen to. And so when the opportunity came to start my own, as I said, I was struggling after having my second boy. And so I realized that not only did I have this opportunity to start a podcast, but I actually thought I had something to say that wasn't, scripted in a news format. And so I started talking about my motherhood experience. And the coolest thing that I've discovered through it is that this motherhood, this like community of women, all has their own story in it, but everybody relates to each other in some teeny tiny way. And so I've done over 100 episodes now, and each one is just a solitary conversation, one-on-one with another mom, where we talk about where she's at in motherhood on that day. And I think it's very therapeutic for the both of us. And, we talk about sometimes really heavy things. We talk about infant loss, and we talk about infertility, and we talk about childhood cancer. And the deeper the conversation, the more raw and more honest, the more my listeners appreciate it. And I always joke, I'm like, these people are sick. Like, these people are sick. But in fact, it's just feeling this connection to another woman on the other end of the earbud who might not be going through the same thing that you're going through, but it's really relatable in the sense that it probably makes you feel out of control, and it probably makes you feel scared. And there's still those same emotions, regardless of the different setups in why you're feeling that way. And so I think, women in motherhood have just formed this unspoken community and connection with each other. And so I think my podcast is a cool place where I can kind of foster those conversations. And I've come to really, really love meeting people on a different plane than I do when I show up somewhere with a camera. When you just say, I just want to hear about you and what it's like to be a mom today. Women show up differently than if they're being interviewed about, a new park going in. It's a different kind of conversation that I'm used to having, in a journalism role. And so I really, really love the contrast of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed that when I listened to your podcast, that there was a mom out on there who we ended up having like a similar story, and some of the things that she was going through, I didn't experience going through my pregnancies, but there were some very, very these things that we had in common. It was just so funny when I had picked an episode to listen to, and she was saying how she had 2 babies within 2 years. And that was the same with me. I had a honeymoon baby, and then I ended up having my second. It was the 2 within 2 years. Like, what? Just that in itself.
Wow.
But, I mean, in her experience with infertility and mine, it resonates. It makes, like you said, it makes you feel I have something in common. I'm not alone going through the things that I'm going through. And the more stories that you tell on the podcast, the more, they could help women who are going through these things, or even just bringing these different topics to your attention too. It just makes you, be more empathetic.
Well, because the thing is that you might not have,
Yeah.
you might not have experienced infertility, but I bet you your best friend
Mm-hmm.
did, and now you have a better idea of what she's going through. You know, it's like, I feel like it's helped me have a little more empathy for the way other people's lives have shaken out,
Mm-hmm.
where sometimes you can judge people and dismiss them and assume, oh, she must be this or she must be that. And then when you hear conversations, you start to learn how complex, being a parent is, and how, the decisions you make are not the same as the decisions of another mom. And you can't necessarily predict the outcome,
Mm-hmm.
based on one decision. And so it's in so many ways, it's like such a selfish venture, because I usually somehow interview the right person at the right time, in the sense that I needed to hear their story on that day at that hour. And I always walk away going like, wow, I can't believe I just met her,
That's it's a great feeling to have, that awe, that
it's very special to me.
Yeah. And like you said, there's Denise, the newscaster that people see, and then there's Denise, the mom, and that we can hear on your podcast. And that like you said, I'm just the mom of two. I don't know. I don't have this agenda to sell you on the news, and it's nice to see, that contrast, and then to see, like, growing up, but I mean, before the internet, it was, you saw the newscasters, but you didn't really know that much about them. You didn't know about their home life. It was just this person who was reading the news, and maybe didn't show emotion. I don't know how, if you are trained that way in school, like you're not supposed to show emotion. I remember them talking, people bring up when Kennedy died and Cronkite delivered the news to the nation, and how he took off his glasses and wiped his eyes, and how they said, wow, first of all, newscaster showing emotion, and then Walter Cronkite, a man showing emotion on TV, it was a big deal. And I think, I mean, we see now, there are things, this is your, there's your job, but there's also so much more behind, what we see at 6:00. It's going, and that's, and that's great. I mean, that's just great that you are willing to share those things on your podcast, and that we get to know you that way. And it's brave of you to do that. And so, what do you find most fulfilling about your?
Well, thanks.
What do you find most fulfilling about your career?
Connecting with other humans. So many people just, feel alone and, want to connect with somebody else. And so this is a platform in which to promote that connection. I love that, for, when it comes to my podcast, for 45 minutes, there is another woman on the other end of the line who gets to have that 40 minutes to be about her, and, to share in her joys and her struggles. And, how many moms take 40 minutes to talk about themselves, and it feels really good to allow someone the opportunity to share their story and talk about themselves. It's like, it seems like such a, like an impolite thing to do, to talk about yourself, but, it feels really good sometimes to say, hey, this is what I've been through, and this is what I'm really good at, and this is what I'm kind of crummy at. And then to know that somebody else is going to listen to you and go like, thank you for saying that. I needed to hear somebody say that. So that's really, really fulfilling to me. It's also really, really fulfilling to me to take people places that they wouldn't normally be able to go. You know, when I get the rare opportunity to go to Marine boot camp, like, I think it's really cool to then share that experience with you when I come back and to bring you the stories of, of these recruits. And maybe the next time you would think about that when you see a Marine on the street or meet one or what have you. And so it's kind of like a cool thing to be able to share my access with somebody else. Like, you probably wouldn't be able to do such a thing, but I got the chance to, and let me take you along for the ride, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, we've come to the point in the podcast where I do 5 random questions. So, are you game?
Okay.
Let's
do it. Let's do it.
So, the first one is, if you could have dinner with any 3 people, dead or alive, who would they be?
Okay. So I just on Instagram, in honor of International Women's Day, I shared my top 3 female podcasters that I love to listen to. And so I absolutely would love to have dinner with Megyn Kelly, former Fox News anchor. She now has her own podcast that is fantastic. And wipe away whatever you think you know about Megyn Kelly, because she is just one of the most well-spoken, well-educated, well-rounded individuals. And she can take any topic and make it digestible for me through her conversations. I think she's incredible. So I would love to sit down with her. And on the completely opposite side of the spectrum, I got to meet her, but it was like a really, really quick thing. My other favorite female podcaster is named Heather McDonald, and her niche is celebrity gossip and reality TV shows. So like I said, complete opposite end of the spectrum. But what is important to know about her is that she's a stand-up comedian, and she has hustled for everything she's gotten. She is only where she's at with her podcast, and she's always in the top 5 among male comedians, on her podcast rankings that she always shares about. And I'm so glad that she does. She created that for herself. She, it didn't come out of the audition that she was hoping to get or the TV show she was hoping to get. She literally created that for herself. And that's so aspirational to me, to think about a woman in Hollywood who was told no enough times that she finally said yes to herself. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just answer it with two people.
Okay. What is your morning routine?
My morning routine is so dumb. It is so stupid. I try to get up about an hour before my kids. And I drink coffee, and I play games on my phone. And I usually have a podcast going while I'm playing games on my phone. I don't know why. I just like it. I like to drink my coffee and play games on my phone. Yeah. And so I do that for an hour, and then I get my kids up and take them to daycare, and then I go to the gym. I go to the gym every day if possible. Today I rode my Peloton instead. But yeah, those are the 2 things that always have to happen. I guess 3. Drinking coffee, playing games on my phone, and going to the gym. So I could probably add like some meditation or some mindfulness or something, but right now I just play games on my phone.
That's all right. That's all right. Yeah, I need like the IV, the drip of coffee in the morning. You might as well just put it right in the vein.
I know, that's what I'm going to do after we get done here, is go get some coffee.
What is your favorite pump up song? Like, what can you put on that will get you moving if you need to get moving?
Gosh, it sort of depends on the day. I think it's because the Super Bowl just happened, but like if like any like Eminem song from like the early 2000s, I'm just like reminded of how much like, that beat drive just always just kind of gets you moving. There's like a Lizzo song that I've been listening to where the lyrics are like, look in the mirror and she's the one. You're like, yeah, you're right. I am the one. I for sure. I'm definitely the one. So, just I guess I would pull out those two.
Yeah. So you talked about the 2000. If you could turn back time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you tell her?
Oh, I would tell her it gets better. It gets better.
Yeah.
You're gonna figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's so important, especially like the pressures that young people have today. That, I mean, internet was just beginning. Like when you were in college, and in my generation, it's just, I think there's just so much more pressure on young people today. And even though the internet has made us so much, the world's so much bigger for us, but it's made it smaller too.
Yeah.
And that if somebody's going through something, it to tell them that it gets better. It just It's just I would like that's something that's really good. I should put that on my like in my office. It gets better. It's just something
it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I was saying before about, not even really knowing that I didn't know how to do my hair or wear clothes or, things like that. And now like teenagers definitely know. They definitely know what they don't have and what other people have and, who's, prettier in a picture. And, gosh, my poor self-conscious self at that age, if I had known, that other people had stuff that I didn't have, how difficult would that have been, to inject more outside pressure than you already feel at that age.
Yeah. Yeah. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Well, I just want there to be, I was talking about this with a friend the other day. I want there to be like a help desk where you can get all the answers to the questions you had. Mm-hmm. So like when I get there, someone's going to have to tell me who killed JonBenet Ramsey. Like I'm going to need to visit that customer service desk and say, look, I was fascinated with this my whole life. I don't know if I can talk to JonBenet directly. But I want there to be some sort of true crime help desk. We need to know who committed all the murders that we're still not sure about. We need to get some answers to all those like
who is Jack the Ripper
earthly mysteries.
Yeah.
There has to be some sort of help desk.
Yeah. With the information we need, we could fill out the form. Yeah.
I know. It drives me crazy to think that we are not going to know who killed JonBenet Ramsey. It just, we need to know. We need to find this out.
Yeah. Well, exactly. We need to know this. Well, thank you, Denise, for coming on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Welcome. You're so very welcome. It was a pleasure.
If you're hearing this message, you've listened to our new episode all the way through, and for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. You can find Denise's contact information in the show notes at theholisticlifecoachpodcast.com. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review at Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at the Holistic Life Coach Podcast and at the Holistic Life Coach Podcast on Facebook. Thanks again. Until next time, beautiful souls.